So let's take it to our political panel this morning. Joining us is Marama Davidson from the Green Party and David Seymour from ACT. Good morning to you both. Marama, if I could start with you. There is a very clear move toward private property rights, but in doing that, I'm wondering whether you're concerned that that will come at the expense of the environment.
With any of the changes, and we do need better tools, we need to make sure we are putting the well-being of the environment and the voice of people and communities above private gain that this government constantly wants to pander to. We've seen the actions of this government wanting to roll back environmental protections, roll back freshwater protections. So, you know, people don't have any reason to trust that this government wants to make sure that, yep, in improving the tools, we've got to make sure we are putting the well-being of our environment, the voice of communities and democracy ahead of private gain.
That said, Marama, Chris Bishop did make the point that the RMA as it stood hasn't exactly done a great job for the environment. So is there not some positives in these reforms?
And those improvements that everyone agrees to is why Chris Bishop has pulled back the old work that Labour and the Greens had been working on to try and get these tools improved. So he did a bit of a song and a dance and say, yeah, no, we're going to write this, we're going to change this. All he has done is pulled back some of the changes that Labour and the Greens worked on. We've got to still keep an eye on this government because they have proven, for example, to not care about bulldozing over Kiwi for the sake of private development. So we've got to keep a sharp eye on that.
David Seymour, are you happy with how the legislation has come together? I did see one commentator saying it's actually trimming red tape, not cutting it. Do you share that view?
No, I'm absolutely stoked with it. When I entered Parliament 11 years ago, I tried to get my then coalition partners to just tweak the RMA, and they said, no way, Jose. Now we're not tweaking it. We are completely replacing the Resource Management Act. After 35 years, it's gone, replaced with two new laws, a Planning Act and an Environmental Act. And when it comes to our future as a country, Marama talks about private benefit. What I see is a generation that have actually a pathway to property ownership. When people talk about the environment versus private benefit or people getting a house or a job or infrastructure connecting a house to a job, the truth is we've been stopping both things happening, the environment and development. I'll give you a practical example of that. I had some developers come to me and say, look, we can't get any new connections from Watercare to develop around Warkworth, a place north of Auckland where a lot of people want to live now. I also had people from Mahurangi Mussel who Clevedon Oysters who grow oysters in the Mahurangi Harbour, and they said, look, we have had all our oysters poisoned by sewage. And I went to Watercare, I said, how is it possible that we have environmental disaster and yet we still can't build any more houses? We've got the worst of all worlds. And they said, well, the thing is, we need resource consents too. We've been waiting 2 years to get consent to build a pumping station so we can deal with the sewage and the wastewater and issue consents for new houses to be built. So, or connections for new houses to be built. So, we actually can have both. But what we need to do is have a culture where if you're not affecting anyone else, you can just get on with it. You can build more stuff within environmental limits, and so long as you're not affecting other people's property. That's the principle that we've introduced, and it's an absolute generational game changer because this country is such a beautiful place. It's such a great place to live for so many reasons, but we've made it impossible for anyone, especially the next generation, to build their future here in many ways because we've said every Tom, Dick and Henare has the right to say no to just about anything and nothing gets done.
This, though, according to one commentator, puts the onus on developers to act responsibly. Is that dangerous territory, Marama?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we can take for granted is what this government has already shown, which is a complete disregard for community voice, especially when it comes to wanting to protect the environment. We've seen that through the regulatory standards law that has been put through. We've seen that in the fast track opposition from community, from legal experts, from environmental groups, from iwi and hapu, that their voice has been overridden completely for private gain, especially when it comes to wanting to protect the environment. So we have every reason not to trust the government when they say they do care about the environment, because they have shown us clearly that they absolutely do not.
Well, nowhere in this law does it put the onus on people to be responsible. It sets environmental bottom lines and then sets out a framework for spatial planning, so we know where the development's going to go, we know where more houses, we know where more supermarkets can be, so we can have competition in that area and get prices down. We know what farmers have to adhere to within those environmental bottom lines in order that they can get on farming with certainty. So the idea that there is this community that is all good and there's private gain which is all bad. There's actually just a whole lot of people trying to get on with life. Actually, most people do want to care for the environment and provide for the next generation. And that is what this enables without $1.3 billion of planning consultancy every year that actually hasn't protected the environment after all.
I want to talk about the social media ban for under 16s coming into effect in Australia today. David, I know that you were a little reticent about the idea of simply translating it across the ditch home. Why?
I think it would be foolish to rush into something that, let's be honest, the whole world is going to be watching Australia today because nobody knows if it will work. And there are people who make very reasonable arguments that all you're going to do is force children into darker areas of the internet, back onto social media using VPNs, but now unwilling to talk to adults about what they experience. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why this might not be a good idea. It might not work. It might actually make things worse. Having said that, there is clearly a major concern for parents that these social media platforms, through their algorithms, through predatory behaviour from others, through seeing things that young people probably shouldn't see and that we would censor if it was on television or in a movie in the theatre, those are real problems that need to be addressed. But I think we have a great opportunity with the Select Committee currently hearing submissions and coming back with a report on all the options and how to respond, and the opportunity to watch what happens in Australia to give parents action and the reassurance that they need, but also not rush headlong in when there is actually a live experiment going on that we can learn from and do it better.
Do you agree, Marama, that we should sit back, watch and learn, or do you think it's more urgent that we do something in the meantime?
I really want to acknowledge the families and parents who are rightfully concerned about the harm that online social media platforms can do for their young people in particular. But at the Greens, we are concerned about the harm that can happen for all people of all ages. And many of us have friends and whānau in our own circles who we have lost, where the big billionaire tech giants, offshore owned, have been mining our local content, have been hosting misinformation and disinformation, have not been paying their fair share of tax at all, and have been getting away with hosting this very harmful content. So
we know all of those issues,
to pull them in and rein them in.
So should we be
moving
moving
we don't
now?
all. So we do need to rein techs in. We are unsure that a ban, which ends up punishing young people for the harm that big tech giants are causing, it ends up being a type of punishment on young people. We absolutely need to keep them safe, but we'd like to work across parties to come up with the actual tools that rein in the unregulated power and harm that these big tech giants host.
It sort of sounds like the two of you, at least partially agree that we shouldn't be rushing into it, but we do need to do something.
Marama's stories always have a baddie.
Well, I mean,
got to have accountability for the harm that is caused.
I think all businesses and media, for the history of media, have walked the line of how do we get audience attention versus how do we be responsible. I mean, the same thing happened with radio 100 years ago. People were concerned about that, and rules were created and they were reined in, and I don't think radio does quite as much harm as people initially thought. You're going to see something similar around the world with these social media platforms.
Sorry. Are you really equating radio with social media?
Well, as I said, 100 years ago, people were incredibly concerned about what it could mean. And of course, there's rules, there's the Broadcasting Standards Authority, and now, I don't think radio is a major problem. So I know it's probably early in the morning, Nadine, but I'm just drawing the comparison that when new technologies are introduced at whatever time, generally there's a lot of concern. There's always the temptation for some people to push the limits and potentially do stuff that others see as disruptive to the community. And then it settles down and comes back into line, usually with some kind of government regulation along the way. That's the process that we're going through.
I'm not sure that radio did an awful lot of damage to people's mental health, but I understand that the point you were trying to make there.
Well, I think you can take the analogy without
yes, yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the polls just before we wrap it up. Obviously, ACT's poll was pretty good, so we don't need to crow too much about that, David Seymour. But Marama Davidson,
you can if you like, but I would say it's just one poll.
Well, that's what everyone says. Marama Davidson, is it just one poll, or are you concerned about what's happening to the Greens' support?
We'll say the same thing when the polls are up and when the polls are down. They move around a lot. We know we've got a task and a challenge ahead of us, Nadine. We know people are feeling hammered and tempted to just disengage completely from politics. Our job is to remind people of their power, that we offer the solutions, that we get on the ground and have those conversations, and we will keep doing that, mahi.
Thank you both for your time this morning. That is Marama Davidson from the Green Party and David Seymour from ACT.